Big time fight coming up this weekend at bantamweight. We have a couple of guys in a rematch that's just straight up weird. Chito Marlon Vera, he's taking on dangerous Davey Grant. Matt, we have to start off this video with you kind of putting yourself out there. You didn't know this was going to happen. You have to give an apology to Bishop Auckland's own Davey Grant.
I said Jonathan Martinez is going to be in the top 15 of either 145 or 135, and I was very wrong. Davey Grant went out there and knocked him unconscious and looked phenomenal in that fight. So it is from my deepest sincere regrets that I apologize to Davey Grant. Listen, Davey Grant, a much better fighter than I'd ever anticipated. And here's the thing about Davey Grant. We talked about this last weekend with the co-main event with Davison Figueiredo versus Brandon Moreno, how we like it when fighters, even at a later stage of their career, can still show improvements. And when I think about Davey Grant, first of all, I always think Davey, you say from the Navy Grant every single time, but he's a guy who's continued to improve even at the age of 35. And it's kind of weird because unranked bantamweights don't tend to improve, especially at later stages of their career, and they tend to not find themselves in high marquee level fights against guys like Marlon Vera. So it's a huge opportunity for Davey Grant to capitalize on his very impressive performance last time.
This is the craziest thing. So when these two guys fought the last time, it was back at UFC Fight Night 84, Silva versus Bisping. Remember that? Marlon Vera was 9-2-1 at the time. Just turned 23, and Davey Grant, he was 30. He just turned 30. Now, Davey Grant, 35. You've got Vera at 28. And for Davey Grant, his fifth to last fight, Damian Stasiak, who's doing the damn thing over with KSW now, he lost to him by armbar 4 years and 7 months ago. Huge layoff. Comes back, fights the Bermudez Triangle, who I saw fight for New England Fights his last time out. That's 2 years, 10 months ago. Loses. Then he takes more time off. He fights Grigory Popov, and he beats him. Then he takes some more time off. He beats Martin Day and knocks him out. Then he knocks out Jonathan Martinez. The guy's an old man knockout artist at 135. But the long inactivity for Marlon Vera, year 10 months ago. He fights Nolene Hernandez, who didn't have a good UFC run, but still made it. Knocks out Andre Ewell. Loses to Seung Yadong in a back-and-forth close fight. Then he knocks out Sean O'Malley, and then he loses to Jose Aldo. The level of competition's all over the place, but it's definitely there for Marlon Vera. Now, did not look very good against Jose Aldo, but that's easier said than done. So this is a really tricky fight where Davey Grant, the power's there. You know how good he is on the ground. I know I talked about submission loss to Manny Bermudez, but there was a point where the Bermudez Triangle couldn't miss until he fought Charles Rosa, and he just didn't look very good. And then Damian Stasiak, but again, that's 4 years and 7 months ago.
I might have been wrong about Jonathan Martinez, but here's someone I was right about. I've been right about Marlon Vera throughout his whole entire UFC career. There's not a lot of guys that I can say, hey,
Brown knows it.
It's true, though. With Vera, even when he fought John Lineker, I was like, there's a guy who is a special talent here. Like, you don't go in there and lose a decision to John Lineker and have a somewhat competitive fight without getting knocked out. Like, there's a lot of great fighters who've been knocked out by John Lineker, and the fact that Marlon Vera, even really young in his career, was able to have a competitive fight with Lineker showed me that, hey, there must be somewhat of a special talent here. And maybe he hasn't progressed the way everyone thought he would. He has a few losses on his career, but Marlon Vera is still a very, very good fighter, and he's become much more technical and as his career's progressed. He was a fighter who I always looked at him as he's got good submissions on the mat, he's got great head and arm chokes, great front chokes, very similar to kind of like a Brian Ortega. I understand not as developed with the submissions, but with his aspect of the guillotine's really good, and he's got great head and arm chokes. But Vera then developed great leg kicks. Now he's got great stand-up, and I know his work with Jason Perillo has really paid off. That's a guy who he went to Ruka, and then all of a sudden you were like, oh, Marlon Vera got hands now. And it has been a really good progression for him. You have seen, though, that there are limitations to his striking. Like, the Seung Yadong fight was a very close fight, but even I had that fight for Seung Yadong. I understand Marlon Vera was very upset, and a lot of people had it for Vera. I understand. Just because I said it doesn't mean I'm right. Vera could have claims to win that fight. He didn't win the Aldo fight, though, and like you said, it's very hard to beat Jose Aldo, especially at 135, but when you beat a guy like Sean O'Malley, those are the expectations that are then placed upon you, and I know Vera, he made a fairly good account of himself, let's be honest. Like, he turned Aldo into a grappler in the third round, he landed some good leg kicks, he absorbed the power of Aldo. Like, those are all good signs if you're then going to fight a guy like Davey Grant, because I understand, the step from Sean O'Malley to Jose Aldo is immense. Like, I think Sean O'Malley's a really good fighter, but Jose Aldo's one of the greatest fighters ever. the great news for Marlon Vera is the step back down from Jose Aldo to Davey Grant is also pretty big, because I understand, and listen, I apologize to Davey Grant, but other than the Jonathan Martinez win, he really doesn't have a win on his record that says, wow, you're ready to go in there and beat a guy like Marlon Vera, because Davey Grant's a pretty good grappler, but he's not such a good grappler that I think he can go out there and just mop the floor with Marlon Vera. Marlon Vera has great transitions. Marlon Vera himself is a great defensive grappler. And then on the feet, what Grant did against Jonathan Martinez was impressive, don't get me wrong, but he just kept on landing one technique, and Jonathan Martinez couldn't adjust to it. That's great, like, Davey Grant still had to land that technique, but it was more on Martinez to not make those adjustments afterwards. I think if Davey Grant starts landing one technique on Marlon Vera is the guy who, A, can make adjustments mid-fight, because people forget this, he was known for being a late starter. This was a guy who used to lose every first round, have the second round be somewhat competitive, and then in the third round, completely blow the doors off his opponent. Like, I look at Marlon Vera as a guy that, even if he loses the first round against Davey Grant, he can still come back in the second and third. And if he wins the first round against Davey Grant, I just keep on expecting things to go his way.
You made a point saying that Marlon Vera, I mean, it's really tough to go from a loss to Jose Aldo back down. I mean, for Davey Grant, I think all he needed to come into this fight was a loss to Chris Holdsworth, and then he'd win again. He beat Marlon Vera again. He has already beaten him. I can't stress that enough. It was years ago.
It's a different fighter.
He has the win. Marlon Vera opened a minus 325. He's now minus 238. For Davey, who's still in the Navy, he opened a plus 275. Spit it out. He's a plus 190 underdog right now. If we head on over to Topology, 794 total votes. 84% Vera. 56% by decision. 19% by submission. 20% by knockout. For the 16% that have Grant. 51% by decision. 37% by knockout. I think Vera's going to win because, again, mid-fight adjustments, Perlo in the corner, decent boxing, better leg kick, adjusted head movement.
Great cardio.
I think he should be able to win this fight, but Davey Grant's proven people wrong his last two, and also he has a win over Marlon Vera, and usually the person that loses the first time doesn't win the second fight, but I think we are seeing a guy that was 23, now 28, who's made big leaps and bounds adjustments and has moved very far forward in his career, so I'm going with Ecuador's own Chito Marlon Vera.
To Davey Grant's credit, he has also improved a lot since their first fight, even though he is the older fighter out of the two. But I do agree. I think Marlon Vera's definitely made the more advancements out of these two fighters. And for Vera, he has a great opportunity to get back on track. You've got your win over O'Malley. That made you somewhat a star. You have your loss to Jose Aldo. No real shame. It's just you couldn't really get past that big hump to become a contender. Now you're fighting Davey Grant, much more back on your level. If he gets a big win here, I more than expect Marlon Vera to get a top 15 opponent next.
Matt, both of us going with Roque Sports' own Marlon Vera to get the win. Can't wait for it. Big time fight at 135 pounds. Big time fight at 145 pounds in our main event. Dan Ige challenging the now 8-time main eventer in a row. Consecutive. Insane.
Wow.
Chan Sung Jung. Can't wait for it. Keep locked in with Fight Night Picks. We always say, let's get into it.